Committee on Oversight and Government Reform will come to order, and we will resume our hearing regarding Planned Parenthood. We are now going to recognize, if the gentlewoman would need her to change. If we would, we'll now recognize the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Clay, for 5 minutes.
Ms. Richards, welcome, and thank you for your patience for being here so long. Let me start with the point that a lot of Republicans have relied on these doctored videos to accuse Planned Parenthood physicians of violating federal laws. Just yesterday, the Missouri Attorney General, Chris Koster, just completed his investigation of Planned Parenthood and found no wrongdoing. However, I want to walk through some of these accusations and ask you to give us the facts. Just as a preliminary matter, does Planned Parenthood receive any federal funding for its tissue donation program?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, let me ask about the accusation that physicians are illegally altering abortion methods to harvest fetal tissue in violation of federal law. First, here's what the law says. Doctors must certify, and I quote, "No alteration of the timing, method, or procedures used to terminate the pregnancy was made solely for the purposes of obtaining tissue." This provision applies to federally funded research involving the transplantation of human fetal tissue for the therapeutic purposes. This has been confirmed by the Department of Health and Human Services, which wrote that the department, and I quote, "has not funded or conducted this specific type of research in recent years." So even though this law does not apply to Planned Parenthood affiliates, you have still issued guidance that is consistent with the law. Is that right?
That's correct. So just to be perfectly clear, the federal law you're citing doesn't apply to Planned Parenthood because it, as you said, it only applies to donations related to transplantation research funded by the NIH. One other thing, Congressman Clay, actually I would like to mention that when all of this came up, I actually wrote to the NIH and said, if it's time to review the way fetal tissue research is done in this country, we welcome that. It's a very small part, obviously, of what we do. Only 1% of our health centers even allow for tissue donation. But it seems that it would be an appropriate forum for biomedical ethicists and researchers and doctors to do that, and we welcome that if the NIH chooses to do so.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, let's turn to these accusations. David Daleiden and the Republicans accused Planned Parenthood physicians of changing the timing, method, and procedure of abortion solely for the purpose of obtaining fetal tissue. So let me ask you directly, do Planned Parenthood physicians alter the timing, method, or procedure of an abortion solely for the purpose of obtaining fetal tissue for research in violation of federal law?
Well, first, just to go back, as we've established, federal law doesn't apply, and yet our own standards and guidelines go above and beyond what's required. I have spoken with our chief medical officer, and she assures me that she knows of no instance where the method or the procedure or the timing of an abortion was altered in any way in order to facilitate what is the patient's desire to donate fetal tissue for fetal tissue research.
Let me ask you, when physicians do make clinical adjustments during the course of the procedure, why would they do that, and how does that work?
Well, I'm not a doctor, so I can't speak to everything that doctors do, but I do know that our #1 goal at Planned Parenthood is the health and safety of our patients, and so certainly our doctors' #1 goal is to make sure that if it is an abortion patient, that they have a successful procedure. And I know from talking to doctors all across the country, long before any of this happened, that doctors do all kinds of things, as do all surgeons, I assume, make decisions in the middle of procedures to ensure a good outcome.
Let's move to a different accusation, which is that women are not consenting to participate in these tissue donation programs. Can you speak to that women may not be consenting to donating the fetal tissue?
Women are fully consenting, and they consent at Planned Parenthood certainly prior to an abortion. And one of the interesting things that has happened, in part as a result, I think, of all of the press, is that there are more and more women asking if they could actually donate fetal tissue because they understand the importance of the research that's done. But again, we only have 2 affiliates now who are able to, can help women who want to make a fetal tissue donation.
Thank you for your
Gentleman's
response.
time has expired.
Thank you, Mr.
The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And thank you, Ms. Richards, for being here today. How much total revenue collected or reimbursed for Planned Parenthood and its affiliates comes from abortion services?
I believe we've provided all of our financial information. I don't have that number.
And do you have a ballpark?
No, I don't. But again, we've provided, I know there was some back and forth about this, but I just verified it on the break. We've provided all of the 990s, not only for the national organization, but our 59 affiliates, and I believe their audited financial statements.
I guess if we were to extrapolate from the Planned Parenthood website of the cost of an abortion, the average cost, or of an abortion pill, it would be at $1,500 for the service of abortion or $800 for the pill. If you multiply that times 327,000, that would come somewhere between 40% or 22% of a figure. Regardless, it's $491 million down to $261 million, just from the ballpark figures we see on Planned Parenthood's website.
And I have to, I'm sorry to interrupt, but actually that's not accurate, but in any case.
Well, then would you be willing to provide us what the accurate figure is, and when could you provide that to us?
Well, what was inaccurate is, I think, what you reported in terms of what the cost of an abortion. Obviously, it varies state to state, so I can't say, but I think your number was high.
Well, we would await the accurate figures, and when would you provide those to us?
I've said to the chair, and we have been abundantly cooperative to this committee. We've provided thousands and thousands of pages of documents, and I'm happy to work with the committee and the staff and with my team to provide other information that you need.
And I appreciate that. We'll continue on. Absent federal funding, what effects specifically would it have on the organization's ability to provide abortion services?
I'm sorry, could you restate your question? I just didn't think I
Absent
understood it.
federal funding, what specifically would it have on the organization's ability to provide abortion services?
Well, okay, I hope I'm answering your question correctly. No money, no federal dollars go to Planned Parenthood or other hospitals or other healthcare providers.
So it would have no impact,
services.
is that your answer?
No impact on what? I guess that's
on
what
abortion services.
If we were not reimbursed for family planning, for preventive care.
No, I'm asking specifically, absent federal funding, what specific impact would it have on abortion services?
I can't think of a specific impact. I'm just trying to make sure I really am trying to be responsive
No,
to understand your question.
And I can see that. Thank you. Can federal funds be used for abortion equipment?
Federal funds are only, in my understanding, and if there's something there may be something I'm unaware of, but federal funds can only be used for abortion services in very specific instances, which we talked about earlier, which is if a woman has been raped, if she's the victim of incest, or if it's the life of the mother.
I'm curious on the equipment, on the salaries, cleaning services, rent and maintenance of facilities. What about that?
So let me just, on the abortion services and on federal funding for abortion services, this is actually done through the states. That's where Medicaid funds come through, and I I mean, certainly we could look at
Okay.
any specifics on
we-
that, but
we
that's.
would- we
that
would
is
like that if you could answer
oversight
that,
by,
'cause I
well,
realize
it's
in
the
the
federal
time that we
government, though,
have-
that actually is making those decisions.
Well, thank you. And
It's not, I mean, just, it's
for the
not Planned
record, Mr.
Parenthood.
Chairman, we've heard testimony today that 2.7 million receive services in the last reported year. That number is actually over 3 million when you add the 327,000 aborted children to that figure. For the record, 2.7 million receive services and 327,000 receive a legal termination with no right to choose life. 3 of my 5 children are adopted. It is my firm belief, and the financial evidence substantiates, that Planned Parenthood clearly does not need taxpayer funding to survive. We can carve up a child and call it a choice. We can destroy human life and call it health care. We can make the killing of children legal and pretend it is beneficial. We can cover acts of barbarity with the veneer of civility, but we cannot escape our accountability before the Creator of life. And with that, Madam Chairman, I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Cartwright.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And Ms. Richards, I want to thank you for being here today. I want to ask about Planned Parenthood's federal funding, since that's supposed to be the topic of today's hearing. What we're hearing is that Planned Parenthood receives about $500 million in federal funding every year, and it's easy to see why you hear that figure a lot, because it's an awful lot of money. And it seems like, I mean, the way you hear it, it sounds like Planned Parenthood receives a big check, big cash payment every year. But I want to break down the numbers. According to the data compiled by the GAO, something like 80% of Planned Parenthood's government-related revenue in 2012, about $400 million, came from Medicaid reimbursements. I think that's the point you've been trying to make today, is that it comes in the form of Medicaid reimbursements through the states for activities such as cancer screenings and wellness exams. Ms. Richards, first off, is that figure correct, around 80% to the best of your knowledge?
I think that to the best of my knowledge, it is correct. We, about 1.6 million of our patients in a year are covered by some kind of federal program, Title X, or they're Medicaid patients, or there's a few other programs that we work on HIV/AIDS programs and the like.
And so is that figure fairly consistent with more recent years?
Yes, and also one thing I just want to make sure is clear, it's not all federal funds. A lot of state funds are combined in that figure, and I don't know the exact breakdown.
Fair enough.
So it's just not all federal dollars is all I meant to say.
But what these numbers really mean is that Planned Parenthood affiliates provide a massive number of health care services to Medicaid patients, and then they're reimbursed on a fee-for-service basis.
That's exactly correct.
Fair statement?
And I think proudly we provide really, really good health care for Medicaid patients, and we're proud of that.
Okay. Well, I come from a district that has a lot of rural territory in northeastern Pennsylvania. We have an awful lot of Medicaid-eligible patients.
Yes.
So it's an issue of concern to me. Medicaid patients are primarily people who are poor, elderly, or have disabilities. Isn't that right?
I don't know the breakdown of all Medicaid patients, and certainly don't know for your area of Pennsylvania. I do know how many patients we see in Pennsylvania.
Just in general, Medicaid patients, stay with me here.
Okay.
Medicaid patients tend to be poor, elderly, or have disabilities, don't they, in general?
Again, I'm just speaking, I only know of the folks we serve, so I can't speak about Medicaid patients more broadly. We don't serve many elderly Medicaid patients. Primarily, we serve women between the ages of 18 and 44.
Of course, that's true.
Okay.
And many of Planned Parenthood's Medicaid patients come from medically underserved communities, right?
That's correct.
And that's why the $500 million figure gets thrown around so much. That's why that's so misleading, because this is not an appropriated amount from discretionary spending. It is reimbursements for fee-for-service treatment. And like other medical providers, Planned Parenthood is reimbursed for the health care it provides to these patients, and that's generally the way health care insurance works anyway, right?
That's exactly right. It's just a different insurance program.
In fact, we rely on providers to take in these patients, especially since Medicaid generally reimburses at a lower rate than private insurance.
That's correct, and I think it's really important because in so many states, as we've talked about earlier, there are not that many healthcare providers that will take Medicaid patients.
In fact, I think Dr. Gosar made that point. Medicaid reimburses rather poorly.
It does, although we're really proud. I was just looking at your state of Pennsylvania. We see 108,000 patients in the state of Pennsylvania, and many of them are in rural communities.
Well, so when we talk about defunding Planned Parenthood, a big part of that is excluding Planned Parenthood affiliates from Medicaid. Isn't that right?
Correct. Essentially, and that's what is important. I'm so glad you made this point because we can't make it strongly enough. It's, as you said, we don't get an appropriate amount of money. This would actually, what Congress is proposing doing, would deny people on Medicaid the ability to go to the provider of their choice, and many of them do choose Planned Parenthood for a whole host of reasons.
Thank you for being here, Ms. Richards. I yield back.
Thank you.
I thank the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Carter, is recognized. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Richards, you were kind enough to provide this committee with a list of the salaries and the compensation of the officers of Planned Parenthood. That is correct and up to date. Is that right?
I'm sure it is if we provided it.
Okay. Well, thank you. So, I'm looking at this and I'm seeing an employee at Planned Parenthood's affiliate in Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota was paid $459,827 in 2013. Is that correct?
I don't have the figures in front of
That's
me.
what
I
you
do
provided us.
happen to know that
Okay.
affiliate is this is a woman who's been a healthcare professional for decades.
At $459,000. And it is correct that you were compensated $590,000
Well, no, it was actually,
in 2013. Is that correct?
well, I tried to address this earlier. My
I
salary,
understand.
would you like, I'm sorry, I was
But
going to
I'm
continue.
just, yes or no, is that correct?
$520,000 is my annual salary, and there was a benefit that was accrued to me over several
So
years.
$590,000 was your compensation in 2013.
In
Is
that year,
correct?
and it's
Okay.
set by the board of directors, and it's important for me.
All I need to know is yes or
No
no.
federal funds go to my salary.
I understand, but $590,000. $590,000 was what you were compensated in 2013, according to what you provided this committee with, correct? Yes. That is what
Your Honor,
is
you're
on here.
answering your own question.
Okay.
I think I've answered the question.
Well, let
Thank
me
you.
ask you about the travel for Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood spent over $5 million on travel in 2013. That's almost $14,000 a day.
Well,
Was that first class, or was any of it chartered jet?
boy, that would be nice. No, I've never, I don't fly first class.
$14,000
No.
a day?
We have 8 million supporters in this country. We provide health care to 2.7 million people. We provide sex education to 1.5
Is
million
that
people.
number correct?
And
$14,000 a day, is that
I don't
correct?
have the figures. in
Okay,
front
well,
of
that's
me.
what you
But I'm
provided.
happy to
I
look.
just want to make sure.
I'm
okay?
happy to look at them.
Can you provide this committee, with the records that show the modes of travel that you have taken, whether they've been first class or whether they've been chartered jet? Can you break down that travel for us?
I will work with the committee staff to provide whatever we can on the questions that have been asked.
We appreciate that very much. Let me ask you something.
Although I will say for the record, I do not travel first class.
Neither do I, but I don't spend $14,000 a day either.
Well, I have, anyway.
Nevertheless, let me ask you, you've made the claim that many patients wouldn't have timely access to basic reproductive health care if it weren't for the services of Planned Parenthood. Yet, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in 2015 said that there are almost 9,700 health care service delivery sites and over 4,000 rural health clinics, including over 1,200 federally qualified health centers operating over 9,000 sites in the United States. How many clinics does Planned Parenthood operate? I believe earlier you said 650 to
It's between
700?
650 and 700, depending.
But yet, if that 650 to 700 were to go away, these patients wouldn't have access to health care.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at the CBO report, which is the Congressional Budget Office, just came out with a report that if Planned Parenthood, if women were unable to go to Planned Parenthood, Medicaid patients or Title X patients, 390,000 women would immediately lose health care next year.
The problem
So I'm reporting back what the government
The problem I have with that is that the Obama administration reports that there are over 13,000 publicly supported health care alternatives in the United States. Have you seen that? Are you aware of that?
I haven't
That's
seen
what,
that.
That's what the Obama administration is telling us. Yet, so that's almost 8 times as many as Planned Parenthood has. And out of those clinics, I mean, we've got almost 20, excuse me, I misspoke, over 20 federally funded clinics as opposed to every Planned Parenthood. Yet those federally funded clinics, they don't have $100 million endowments. They don't have $70 million Manhattan condos. They don't spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on Grammy-winning performers performing at their galas. They don't do any of those things, yet they are able to provide services, needed services to women. Why is it that Planned Parenthood has got to have that in order to provide the same services? Do you believe, yes or no, do you believe that they have to have that?
Well,
it's yes or no, that's all it is.
With all respect, that wasn't really a question. I would say I really stand by the fact that we provide health care to many, many women in this country who have no other options.
The question, Ms. Richards, the question was, have you got to have that in order to provide health care to women?
We provide.
These other clinics don't have it, and they provide it.
Well, I'm not going to speak to every other hospital,
So you
healthcare
think
center,
they have
and
to have it in order
FQHC
to
in the
provide health care
country.
to women?
I think we provide excellent health care to women in this country, and I think the
That's
point
not
here.
the question. The
but I
question
think
is, do you have to have a $100 million endowment, $70 million condos? I think not.
I don't know what
Mr.
you're
Chairman,
speaking
I
about, but
yield.
with respect, I think it's important that the question here is, do low-income women in this country have the right to choose wherever they want to go to for health care? And 2.7 million of them choose Planned
Why
Parenthood.
don't you let them go to one of those $70 million condos in Manhattan and get
Young lady
care?
from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so very much for the courtesies extended. Let me thank the chairman of the full committee for his courtesies, and to Mr. Cummings, certainly for his courtesies as well, for my participation in this very vital hearing today. I am a member of the Judiciary Committee as well, and we held such a hearing some weeks ago, and so I can almost say deja vu. Let me thank Ms. Richards, first of all, as a fellow Texan, to thank her for the legacy of her family that has always been engaged in public service, and that's what I consider you and Planned Parenthood as doing. Coming from Texas, let me cite the Houston Planned Parenthood offices, of which I've been in and walked through and seen the clinics, and seen individuals who fell into my arms, indicating that without Planned Parenthood, they would not be able to, in fact, have health care. Let me ask you very quickly, as my time goes, it may be, as I've been listening this afternoon, that we have been mixing more than apples and oranges. It might be apples and potatoes, because we're talking about abortion, and when I say that, many of these questions have come forward. And I just wanted to read this quote from a senator in Oklahoma in discussing Planned Parenthood. My focus is to try to deal with the life issue. Defunding Planned Parenthood is just a sideshow for the real event. Has this come to your attention, Ms. Richards, that many are talking about something that really has nothing to do with your federal funding?
Well, I do think it's been a bit of a theme, and I think that is one thing I'd like to say. It's important that I don't really believe that an organization, a healthcare provider, should be discriminated against for providing a legal service, whether it's Planned Parenthood or a local community hospital or anyone else.
Let me follow up as well and hold this up and ask unanimous consent to place it into the record. And let me cite for some of my colleagues, Ohio, 28 clinics, 80,000 patients, 66,000 on contraception, total on sexual transmitted diseases, 105,000. Texas, 38 clinics, 150,000 patients, and 108,000 on contraception and others dealing with sexually transmitted diseases. But if those clinics went away, then we're talking about 28 in a big state like Ohio, 38 in Texas, thousands of women losing access to health care. Is that not correct, Ms. Richards?
That's correct.
And are you familiar with the Texas cases which challenged or discussed the legislative initiatives in 2014, 2015 that were literally implode clinics in Texas, and the Supreme Court decision that ruled in 2014 and 2015. I think the United States Supreme Court, maybe based on Roe v. Wade, maybe based on the fact that abortion services, which are not part of the funding here, but in any event, just so my colleagues would know that, in my state of Texas, the state law would have cut off 75% of reproductive health care clinics. The Supreme Court indicated that the Texas law was unconstitutional, indicating that the separate work that you do dealing with people's right to choose is a lawful act and has nothing to do with federal funding. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
And the Supreme Court has indicated that abortion by law is not illegal in those cases.
And I know a lot of these are still on appeal. I do think, since we both come from Texas, I think it's important to know that when the state of Texas shut down the Texas Women's Health Program and to end Planned Parenthood's ability to serve women, there are 25% fewer women in Texas that are receiving care as a result. And so I think that's why it's so important that we don't ever put politics ahead of women's health.
Let me get these last two questions in. As a
Certainly.
member of the House Judiciary Committee, we deal a lot with the FBI, so does this committee as well. Let me just ask you about Mr. DeLayden's work. Is Mr. DeLayden a member of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, to your knowledge?
Well, not to my knowledge.
Is he an FBI agent, to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge.
Is he a member of the Department of Justice?
I don't believe so.
Has the Health and Human Services ever investigated you per se about your Medicaid reimbursement, meaning something that you have not been able to answer or file another filing?
We follow all the laws at the state and federal level every day.
So Mr. DeLayden has been engaged in an investigation, has no authorization, is not a member of the FBI, which I would call dastardly and deceitful. So I'd ask you this question. Are you aware that Mr. DeLayden has pleaded the Fifth Amendment in some cases that he's engaged in?
I have read that in the paper.
Are you aware that it has been checked by RH Reality Check that Mr. DeLayden stole the identity of the president of the feminist club at Mr. DeLayden's high school? Have you heard that?
I've also read that in the paper.
And let me cite not you, but RH Realty Check. Would we then, Mr. Chairman, as I finish, would we then say that we're here today to speak about the facts? And therefore, are you saying on the record today that Planned Parenthood does not use any federal funding for anything that is not authorized under the laws of the United States of America?
Time of the
Can
gentleman
she answer that question?
Of course.
We follow all the laws at the state and federal level, and whenever we find issues, we take care of them and address them.
I thank the gentleman for his courtesy. I thank this committee for its courtesy. Thank you. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Thank you. A few questions. I'd just like to clear up some things. First of all, you talk about the percentage of women who are low income served by Planned Parenthood. I am under the impression that for defining income, if you have a younger person, a 21-year-old college student, or even a 16-year-old high school girl, that for the purpose of defining income, you leave out the mother's income. So, for example, if a billionaire's daughter who made $5,000 last year came to Planned Parenthood, she would be considered low income. Is that correct?
I would have to check on that. I don't know of any billionaires' daughters that are coming to Planned Parenthood, but I'm happy to look into that and to address your question.
Okay. I'm saying for the purpose of the family planning waiver, I think it's pretty well publicized that, you know, both high school kids, college kids, for the purpose of determining income, they look at they're considered a family of one despite living with parents. Is that true?
I'm happy to check on that. And
Okay.
I think a lot of high school or college women, they may, at that point, they don't have the resources of their parents, and a lot of young women do come to us because they need family planning but can't talk to their families.
Okay, the next question I have, when I look at cities around me that have a Planned Parenthood clinic, usually they're what by Wisconsin standards are medium-sized cities, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. Usually in those cities, as a guy, I could go to many clinics locally that have all the machines that one would need. All of these clinics, as far as I know, take Medicaid dollars. So they, you know, you could go to any of those clinics to get any medical service, you could. I guess what I'm getting at is, in my opinion, if Planned Parenthood disappeared tomorrow in those towns, there would still be 3 or 4 or 5 clinics or hospitals providing all the Medicare, all the medical care you would want, and quite frankly, providing superior care to people who are on Medicaid.
Well, I think we do
Isn't
provide
accurate.
superior medical care, but at any
I mean, I'm saying superior care in the sense that on Medicaid, without the deductibles and copays, it's usually better insurance than other people have. I guess what I'm saying is, it would seem to me if Planned Parenthood clinics were not around in those cities, with the exception of a couple of abortion clinics, there would be 3 or 4 other clinics available to do any women's health or men's health or health of any nature whatsoever. Don't you feel that's true?
Well, I don't, in that I have been to Wisconsin a lot. Obviously, you know more about Wisconsin than I do, but I know we have 22 health centers in the state of Wisconsin, and last year we provided, or the most recent year we have figures, we provided health care to 65,000 people, and actually, I think we are the largest, don't quote me on this, but I will check to make sure, but I think we're the largest family planning provider of the network in Wisconsin, so that's pretty hard to replace.
Well, no, I think you're not answering my question. If you have a city in which there are 4 clinics, full-service clinics that you could go to for anything under the sun, and a Planned Parenthood clinic, I would assume that if the Planned Parenthood clinic disappeared, you would have 4 or 5 other clinics to deal with anything that Medicaid paid for.
We just haven't seen that to be true. I mean, I use the example of the state of Texas, where they eliminated Planned Parenthood as an option in communities, and 25% of women lost access to care. So I actually don't think, there are a number of reasons that women go to Planned Parenthood. It's personal choice, as well as availability, as well as the services we provide. And for many women, we are the provider that they think best meets their health care needs. And I do think that's really kind of what's at stake here.
Okay. You emphasized before the lack of ability of access to health care for minorities. Do you feel that you have a special role to fill there?
I'm sorry,
You emphasized,
it's very hard to hear you.
Okay.
I apologize, I think.
But before you emphasized that you felt there was a lack of access of health care to minorities, do you feel that you have a special role to play there?
Now, we have a special role to play for anyone who is underserved, and that includes folks of low income, folks of rural America, folks in areas of the country where there is less public health care access. So it really is all across the gamut.
Okay, I'll give you one more question and come back to the prior one. In Wisconsin, all of the Planned Parenthood clinics are in sizable cities in which there are, as far as I can see, probably multiple other medical providers. Is there anywhere in the country that you know of, any metropolitan area in which Planned Parenthood offers services in which there are no other providers to take Medicaid dollars?
It's just beyond what I know. I can't really respond to that. But I think, again, if we're in 22 communities in Wisconsin, which we are, according to these records, that's a lot of, I'm not saying those aren't all decent-sized cities, but that's a lot of rural community as well.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Ms. Richards. Planned Parenthood Action engages in political activity. Is that correct?
The Planned Parenthood Action Fund, which is a separate corporation, does.
And you're compensated by that organization?
Well, I mean, I get compensation really to reimburse for my
yes
costs.
No? For brevity.
I'm just trying to explain. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I understand, and I know how these things work, but the answer is yes or no, and I think you've already answered it. It's what, 31,000? Is that about right?
I don't have the figures for last year, but whatever my compensation was, it is for work that I do on behalf of the Action Fund.
Okay, where does Planned Parenthood Action get its funding?
Private donations. We have 8 million supporters in this country and a number of donors from all over the country.
And is there any money from Planned Parenthood that goes to Planned Parenthood Action?
There's the Planned Parenthood Action Fund, which it does advocacy and it does electoral work. There is advocacy.
But I know what they do. I'm asking.
Well, I think I'm trying to be responsive to your
I know,
question.
but
right?
for brevity's sake, and out of respect,
well,
for brevity's sake.
For 60, as you know, for 501c4 organizations, they cannot do a majority of their work as electoral work. That's under IRS
Understand.
code. And
I
so more than
understand
60, I think between 65 and 70% of the work of the Action Fund is non-electoral.
You also have a PAC. Is that correct?
Okay, yeah, I was just going to one, yeah. Yes, there is a federal
All right.
PAC.
And that federal PAC, how much, just round figures, what did it spend in 2014?
How much the federal PAC spent in 2014, I can get that for you. I'm
Okay.
not being evasive, it's obviously public record, I just don't have it with me.
Where does the PAC get its money?
It raises its money from individuals.
Are you
and sometimes,
compensated, are you compensated by the PAC?
I don't believe I have ever been compensated by the PAC, although I know that the federal law requires if you are doing work on behalf of a federal candidate, I believe you actually have to, your time has to be paid for by a PAC. So we follow all the,
Do you
all
have
the,
any
all the laws
oversight
and
over the PAC?
regulations.
Do you have any oversight over the PAC? Any managerial responsibility?
Sure, I mean, in the
Okay.
sense that everything
Then
rolls
you're
up.
supposed to be compensated if you do any work for the PAC, and you need to check that out.
Well, I think
I want to go to this. In 2004, you founded a group called America Votes, a coalition of 42 national grassroots organizations focused on elections. How many of these organizations collaborate with or are incorporated into Planned Parenthood's political operation?
I'm sorry, you're asking me about a job I had before Planned Parenthood?
That is
that
correct. That
Okay,
was
but can you
focused on
restate,
elections.
sorry, could you restate the question? We're just out of, I was just out of context.
How many of these organizations are collaborating with or have been incorporated into Planned Parenthood's political operation?
I really don't know.
So I would assume that some do, because you can't answer. It's either a yes or no. Some have, or they're either there or they're not.
I really don't, well, I think you asked me how many, and I said I don't know.
All right,
I think
let me-
a lot of these organizations work together, but I don't,
You know,
I could get you, I mean, we could get more information for you.
That would be helpful. You've got these high-paid executives. There's, interestingly enough, 44 of your highest-paid executives make more than any cabinet member. 28 of them make more than any member of the cabinet. You got, that's over 200,000. You got another 11 make over 300,000. That's more than anybody in the cabinet, any Supreme Court justice, the Chief Justice, the
I don't think we
Vice
can-
President, and you've got 4 that make more than the President, not counting you. Are any of them expected to make political contributions?
By who? I'm sorry.
By you.
No.
Do you direct political contributions to candidates?
The PAC does.
Yes, but do
It
you
votes
have
on
any
it.
input in who gets?
No, but there is a PAC committee that votes on this.
Are you
You're
on that
asking me a
PAC
question,
committee?
I'm trying to respond.
Are you on that PAC committee?
I'm not on the PAC committee.
Do you have any input into who gets political contributions?
No, the PAC committee votes on who gets political
So there's
contributions.
no collaboration between you and the PAC committee? You're stating that for the record.
I haven't sat on a PAC committee meeting for a long time.
All right, let me
But
ask.
it's, I mean, and
Your PAC
we operate
advertises itself.
absolutely, you know, we meet the federal laws and restrictions.
I appreciate how you want to answer this. Your PAC advertised itself as being nonpartisan, yet in 2014, 100% of the contributions went to Democrats. In 2012, 99% went to Democrats.
I actually don't believe that's accurate.
That's what's reported here.
Okay, well, I'll go back and look, but
All right.
we support, we've done work on behalf of, we
I
support
just-
anyone who supports women's rights.
Mr. Chairman, I'm reclaiming my time. I just want to point out that it's not nonpartisan and that you've given almost, I mean, in every case, almost every dime to Democrats, including to 9 members of this committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we welcome any Republican who supports women's rights and women's health care access, and so, thank you.
Gentleman yields back. We'll now recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Gowdy, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions for Ms. Richards, and then I'm going to yield whatever's remaining to the chairman. Ms. Richards, Peter Welch sits right down there on the other side. He's a gentleman from Vermont who's a Democrat. Peter and I do not agree on very many issues, but there's not a more well-regarded member of our body, I don't think, and he evidenced that today by making it crystal clear that he makes an effort to understand both the analysis and the conclusions of those who may have a different position from the one that he holds. Do you understand how some of us may, at a base level, disagree with you on the origin of life. Do you make that same effort to understand that my friend from Vermont, Peter Welch, makes?
I fully respect, and I think I spoke to this in my opening statement with the chairman, that I understand people have different feelings about whether abortion should be legal in this country or not. I think it is important that it is legal, and we can disagree. And I know thinking people disagree about abortion, and our goal at Planned Parenthood is to be judgment-free and to allow people, and women in particular, to make their own decisions about their pregnancies.
We're going to get to the judgment-free zone here in just a second, but you mentioned abortion. How about partial birth abortion? Do you understand how some of us may support a ban on partial birth abortion?
Well, I don't want to, I'm not trying to be argumentative, but that was a political formulation, not a medical formulation, but I certainly understand that it was passed and is the law of the land, and Planned Parenthood certainly meets the requirements of that law.
My question wasn't whether you follow the law. My question was whether or not you understand how some of us may be very much opposed to that practice. That was my question.
I understand how people can disagree based on their religious beliefs, their background, their own personal experiences, and I also understand that people sometimes change over time, and that's the human condition.
Are you suggesting those who hold a contrary view to you need to change? Is that why you added that line, Ms. Richards?
No, I've just, candidly, in my 10 years at Planned Parenthood, I've experienced myself people who have picketed outside of our health center and then found themselves in need of our services, and we try not to judge.
And I'm sure that there have been employees who grew tired of participating in the practices that they were participating in, and they may have gone to the other side, might they? How about opposing abortions on the basis of gender or race? Can you understand how people may support legislation that ban that?
As I've tried to say, I appreciate that people have a lot of different views on the issue of abortion, and there's any number of different pieces of legislation you could describe. And I think fundamentally at Planned Parenthood, we take the position that we trust women to make their decisions about their pregnancies. I've made my own decisions as well, and so I feel like I can kind of walk in these shoes.
I appreciate the way you like to frame the issue, that you're the reasonable one, and those of us who have a contrary position are not reasonable.
I didn't say that.
No, that's exactly the last answer you gave. That's exactly what it was, much like your people evolved to a more advanced viewpoint, much like that comment was also directed to that.
Those are not the words I said. I said sometimes people change their opinions.
No, it's not always what you say. Sometimes it's just what you mean.
Well,
in 2014, you disagreed with my colleague's 100% figure. What percent of your money did go to Democrat candidates in 2014 if it wasn't 100%?
I told him I will look. I know that we support Republicans across the country, I wish there were more. I wish there were more Republicans.
Name me some. Name me some Republicans in Congress that you support.
Well, I don't actually want, in this public forum, I'm not going to raise their names because they have been such the target of their fellow party members, but I'm happy to provide that to you later.
Well, the donations are public.
And some of them, yes, I don't know in terms of federal office. I was thinking more broadly in terms of support for candidates across the country. I know there are Republicans that we support. And again, we would like to support more Republicans for office. We wish there was, we don't believe that women's health or women's rights should be a partisan issue.
And we don't think eating dinner salads and drinking wine while you're discussing infanticide, we have a problem with that too. So I'm sure you can understand why we would be as viscerally opposed to what we saw on some of the tapes. Would you not?
I just think we may have feel like everything I've answered you see in a different way. So I respect your opinions, and I'm always open to listening to other people's opinions.
Gentleman's time has expired. Thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. Blum, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Richards, for being here today. I think it's down to you and I.
No kidding. Okay, we could do this somewhere else.
Can you tell me briefly about your background?
I'm a Texan.
Your professional background.
My
That
professional
makes you
background. Oh,
qualified
shoot, I
for
thought
this
you wanted to
job.
go back to the beginning, because I was born in Waco, which I'm very proud of. I was a labor organizer for many years with low-wage working women. I eventually had 3 kids, moved to Washington, D.C. I had the honor of working for Leader Pelosi for a period of time here on Capitol Hill. I've started a couple of nonprofits, and then about 10 years ago, I was hired to be the president of Planned Parenthood.
Do you have any accounting in your background, any finance in your background? Do you understand, I assume you understand well accounting?
I have taken accounting courses as part of my, fortunately, my board has been very kind and offered me those kinds of, that kind of supplementary learning in my job. But I have obviously we have a chief financial officer, we have an entire accounting department at Planned Parenthood I work with closely.
The reason I ask is in a former life, I was a public company CEO. So I know a fair amount about revenues, expenses, overhead, costs. So I'd like to talk a few minutes with you about that. What's your understanding of overhead?
Well,
What is overhead?
what is overhead?
Yes, what's overhead in Planned
Well,
Parenthood? What are
generally-
overhead expenses?
Generally, it's the cost of what things that, just to keep the organization going. Is that what you're?
Salaries, building expenses, rent.
It really depends on, it depends on what you're talking about. If we're in a grant, it can be potentially, overhead could be considered. It really just depends. But yes, of course, all organizations, I assume, and probably in the one you ran as well, we have an office, we have staff, we have electricity.
It must be considerable in a $500 million corporation or nonprofit. The overhead must be considerable. It has to be to run that big of an organization.
Well, I guess it depends on your definition of considerable, but yeah, we have a very dedicated staff, and we provide health care to a lot of people, education to a lot of people, and so, yes, it requires,
Do you profit or make money on abortion services?
So I think we've discussed this many times, and I'll just try to take it one more time. So I run the national office. We do not provide abortion services. We have provided to this committee, if you're on the committee, all of the financial information about the national organization, our audited financial statements, our 990s.
Your providers
and we've also
make money on
provided
abortion
990s.
services? Your providers, do they make money? Your individual affiliated offices, do they make money providing abortions?
I think
In general?
In general, there is no general. I mean, we are a nonprofit. There's 3 sources of income. There are federal and public
I'm talking
funds,
about
there are
individual
donations,
abortion, though.
and there are,
If someone cannot afford to pay for, what's an abortion cost?
It depends, depending on the state.
What if someone can't pay
Depending on the
for it?
procedure. Excuse me?
What if someone can't pay for the abortion?
We raise private dollars to try to help women who cannot afford abortion services if they choose that they want an abortion and they can't afford it. We try to raise money to help supplement the cost of an abortion.
Only through private donations. Do you make up the difference, is what you're saying?
Well, I don't, but our 59 affiliates have a variety of what.
Does Planned Parenthood make a profit or make money on reimbursement of Medicaid services?
We don't make a profit on anything, but in terms of Medicaid.
Well, it depends on how you,
Okay,
you have
well,
$127 million
Let's talk about Medicaid.
excess dollars
Medicaid's
every
very
year.
easy. Yeah, Medicaid's very easy. Medicaid reimburses, and as you know, across the country, Medicaid rates vary widely. In some states, they come closer to paying for the cost of the services. In a lot of states, we actually have to raise private donations to supplement what it costs for.
So you may
a Medicaid
make money on some Medicaid reimbursement services, correct?
I don't know that anyone does, but I'd be happy to find out.
And I'm sure you're well aware it's against federal law to use taxpayer funds for abortions, except for rape,
I'm abundantly
incest,
clear on
and life of the mother.
that, and
So
we're
are
heavily
you-
regulated as HHS regulates.
Are you saying
Medicaid.
today with 100% surety that not one dime of taxpayer money is used to provide abortions?
What I said earlier?
I mean, yes or no? 100% surety?
No, because
Because
actually,
that is against the law.
the federal law allows for federal dollars to pay for abortion services in very rare instances.
Correct. So
Rape,
other than those
incest,
instances.
and the life of the mother. We don't use any federal dollars for any abortion services except for those that are
What about the profits generated
permitted
from
by
those federal
law.
dollars? Are any of those used to cover abortion services?
Sorry, we were kind of talking over ourselves. You have to repeat it. I just didn't hear
The
you.
profits generated from from taxpayer-funded sources such as Medicaid reimbursements. Are any of those profits
I don't
used
believe-
to help cover the costs of abortions?
No. And I don't believe there, I will absolutely, we can go through all of our 990s, happy to go through with the committee, but I don't believe there are any profits from any Medicaid services in this country. As I've said, that's one of the issues we're addressing here is there are too few people willing to take Medicaid patients because often the Medicaid payments do not pay for the cost of birth control, a pap smear, a breast exam, and the like.
And what's critically important is how you apportion or apply the overhead services.
Sorry, the gentleman's
sorry,
time is
I yield
expired.
back.
Thank you. We'll now recognize the gentlewoman from Tennessee, Ms. Black, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank you for allowing me to sit in on this committee, and I thank the witness for being here today. Ms. Richards, on September the 18th of this year, you stated that H.R. 3134, the Defund Planned Parenthood Act of 2015, would, and I quote, block access for folks who deserve high-quality, compassionate care, close quote. Now, Ms. Richards, I would like an opportunity for you, as I ask you these questions, to give you an opportunity to change these false claims. So I wrote the Defund Planned Parenthood Act of 2015. So let me tell you what it does do. It does not reduce public health funding by a single dime. And it would, in fact, increase that funding for community health centers by $235 million. Were you aware of these facts when you made that statement?
Congresswoman, we've discussed many times today that, in fact, the Congressional Budget Office estimated that if women were denied the ability to go to Planned Parenthood, 390...
Reclaiming my time, you said it would block access. It would block access. Now,
for our patients,
yes
it would
or no,
block
Ms.
access.
Richards, do you acknowledge that community health centers outnumber Planned Parenthood clinics by roughly 20 to 1?
I don't know the exact number. I know there's more community health centers than there are Planned Parenthood.
So you will acknowledge that they outnumber Planned Parenthood clinics?
I'm happy to acknowledge that.
Okay. And yes or no, Ms. Richards, do you acknowledge that these facilities funded under my bill provide a broader range? These facilities actually provide a broader range of services than what is offered at Planned Parenthood, for instance, mammograms?
I'm not an expert on what all community health centers provide. I know we work in close collaboration with them, and in fact, often they send us their patients that they can't see for birth control.
But you will acknowledge that you do not provide mammograms, which was acknowledged in this committee today.
We've never made any.
So that would say that they do actually provide more extensive services than what you provide there at Planned Parenthood.
I don't know.
So,
what I said to you, though, is I don't know what all the community health centers provide. We're very clear about what we do provide at Planned Parenthood and about the number of women who voluntarily choose to come to us because of our care.
Again, because I have just a very short period of time. So knowing that the House-passed bill actually increases public health funding and redirects those federal dollars to clinics that offer more preventative health care than Planned Parenthood, you can't substantiate your claim that the bill blocks access to care. It does not block access to care. Now, I do want to just end this by saying that you had a statement that you made that quality, affordable health care is your entire mission. And you made that statement. I actually wrote it down when you made it. Why would you not make an executive decision then to temporarily discontinue your abortion services, which only represents, by your testimony, 3% of the services that you provide, and continue providing what you consider to be your entire mission of 97% of the services provided?
Well, because abortion is a legal service in America, and we think it's important that women, you quoted me as saying quality, affordable health care, and that includes access to quality and affordable abortion services as well.
But you acknowledge that, do you say abortion is health care? Do you consider that health
Yes,
care?
it's a health care service for women. In fact, 3 in 10 women in this country have accessed an abortion
So you
at some
define
point.
health care, abortion as health care?
It absolutely is part of women's health care, and women will I think women would agree.
Well, if I'm a nurse, and if you look at medicine, abortion is not health care. It is not considered to be health care. Now, let me turn
We
to
just
one other
simply
thing.
agree to
that
disagree on this
you
matter.
Well, let's look at the definition, but let me just finish up here, because you have continued to say that these videos were doctored. Are you aware of a report that just came out today that has been released by Coal Fire that shows in their report, and they say the forensic analysis removes any doubt that the full-length undercover videos released by the Center for Medical Progress are authentic and have not been manipulated. Analysis scrutinized every second of the video recorded during the investigation and released CMP to date and found only bathroom breaks and other non-pertinent footage have been removed. I would say if you were to compare the two companies now that have done this investigation, you see Coal Fire has reported on every second of those released audio and video investigation footage, as opposed to the Fusion report, which only had 4 full-length videos. So I think this discussion, Mr. Chairman, is still yet to be had about just what these videos do show and the fact that they perhaps, coming from Fusion, are not doctored. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I thank the gentlewoman. The end is in sight. Ms. Richards, you've been exceptionally kind with your time and generous. We have a couple of cleanups that we need to do here, a couple other questions, and then we will be concluding. We'll start by recognizing the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan.
Ms. Richards, since the videos surfaced, has anyone from CMS or HHS contacted you, any of your board members, or any of your staff?
Since the videos surfaced,
July 14th, and has anyone from the Health and Human Services or CMS contacted you? Or anyone on your staff or board?
I don't know. I don't know.
We need to answer that.
I mean, we have a very big staff. So.
Has anyone from the Inspector General's office at HHS contacted you, anyone at your board, anyone of your staff?
If you're going to ask me about everything, about any contact with any, we have a big board and we have a very big staff, so I can't really answer.
Has the Attorney General of the United States, Loretta Lynch, contacted you?
No.
Contacted Planned Parenthood? Anyone at Planned
Well,
Parenthood?
she may have, I don't know.
You don't know?
I have hundreds of staff, and we have a very large
Has anyone
board.
from the Justice Department contacted Planned Parenthood since the videos surfaced?
And I'm telling you, I don't know if you're asking about everybody that's involved in Planned Parenthood.
You don't know? So, I mean, if the Justice Department would contact Planned Parenthood, it seemed the person who's in charge of Planned Parenthood would know the answer to that question. You don't know?
Well, we have a very large staff, and so
but
you're asking
you're here testifying the videos and the funding and everything else in front of a congressional committee, and I'm just asking.
Mr.
I mean, there's potentially 4 crimes that potentially, we don't know, but 4 crimes transferring fetal tissue for valuable consideration, changing the procedure to solely obtain tissue, doing this without patient's consent, and performing partial birth. There's potentially 4 federal crimes, and all I'm asking is, has the Justice Department contacted you?
What you asked me not is whether they had contacted me. You asked if they had contacted anyone at Planned Parenthood or anyone on our board.
You're here representing Planned Parenthood. Have they contacted Planned Parenthood?
And I said to you, I will find out. I don't know.
Since the videos have surfaced, have you had any conversations with the President of the United States?
No, I have not.
Since the videos have surfaced, have you been to the White House?
No, I have not.
How many times have you been to the White House?
During what period of time?
Since Mr. Obama has been president.
I don't know. That's been, I think, 7 years, so I would have to get back to you on that.
Our count shows that you, your board members, and senior staff have been in the White House 151 times in 6.5 years. I'm just curious. That's why I asked the question, if you've been to the White House or you talked to the President since these videos have surfaced.
And I said I had not.
And you'll get back with me on if the Justice Department has contacted you since these videos have surfaced.
Well, I think you listed several folks, so I'm happy to work with the committee and find out what all you need to know.
CMS, HHS, Inspector General, Justice Department. Justice Department is the most important.
I'll work with the committee staff and work with my team.
I would thank the Chairman. I'll yield to the gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. I want to follow up very briefly on the line of questioning that Mr. Clay had earlier this afternoon. He asked you if there were any federal funds being used in what he termed the tissue transfer program. Do you remember that question, ma'am?
It's been, I'll be honest, it's been a long day.
That's fine. Well, he did ask you, and I think in my recollection is that you said no. And then you paused, and then you said, not that you were aware of. And then he continued the question. That caught my attention, because it struck me that
Okay.
the answer to that question should be an unmitigated no, not that you are or I am aware of. So
Well, I
let me ask you
certainly
this.
don't believe so. Again, I've been here for several hours, and so I'm just
Fair
being,
enough, but let's start
trying
from
to be,
scratch and just say,
just trying
are
to be
you,
very careful.
okay, are any federal funds being used in relation to what we have described here today as the tissue transfer program?
I do not believe so.
Okay. Since that is other than an unmitigated no, I'm going to ask you some follow-up questions. Have you done any investigation to find out if federal funds have been used in that program?
I don't believe they have been, and so there hasn't been any need for any investigation into that. But I'm certainly happy to get back to you on it.
No, you have to, I think you answered the question. I asked you if you had done any investigation, you said no.
Well, because I don't think it's been a,
Fine. I mean, that's your motivation. You may not care, but the answer to my question
I
is
did
no.
not say I do not care, and I sort
You
of,
could say you couldn't have time, but the point of the matter is you have not done any investigation on this point, correct?
that's not what I said. I said I'm not aware, and I will absolutely be happy to get back to you. And it's
Okay,
not
let
because
me-
I don't care, and it's not because I don't pay attention.
Again, not
at
trying to put
all.
words in your mouth, Mr. Richards. Let me ask the question again. Have you done any investigation as to whether or not any federal funds have been used in the tissue transfer program? Okay, okay. By the way, who's the bald guy sitting behind you? Is he a lawyer?
I'm a lawyer.
Okay, that's fine. What is your name, sir?
Planned Parenthood.
Okay,
Hold on.
that's fine. I just want to know who you are, because you
The
actually,
questions will go to the witness.
okay, then I'll ask the
Okay,
witness.
I'm happy to get back to you on this, and
No,
I really.
no, I'm asking you a question. Have you?
And I think I've
as you-
answered it as many times as I can answer, and I'm sorry that my answer isn't satisfactory to you. I've been here 5 hours now, and I'm
Right.
trying to just make sure I'm as responsive as I can be. So,
Okay, so just so the record is clear,
I-
because there's a young lady here making a record of this, I'm going to ask the question one more time, and then you can give me the answer that you deem to be responsive to this question. Have you made any investigation into whether or not federal funds have been used in the transfer of fetal tissue or fetal parts?
I have not made any investigation to that specific question.
Okay, thank you. Is it possible
I
then
think-
that federal money is being used for that program?
I don't believe so.
But that's not based on an investigation, is it?
I feel like we're kind of I think we're just keep repeating the same question.
Okay.
So
No, thanks.
I don't
In
think
fact-
that was a question.
No, it'll
actually.
end the discussion today, but it certainly won't end it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. A few things just for follow-up. Just so we've had an hour's worth of discussion, there are some things that we would like to follow up. So I'd like to go through that list as we conclude, then we'll recognize Mr. Cummings, and then I will wrap up. We would like to get the name and number of affiliates that receive the majority of their revenues from abortion services. If there's clarification as to what we are looking for, let me know, but that is one question.
I'm just going to try to write it down as
Yeah,
you go.
and you got plenty of staff there to write it down. I don't mean to have you take notes, but if you have a question, I want you to be able to ask me as we're kind of doing this. We are looking for the amount of revenue by affiliate for abortion services. So you had that should be pretty straightforward. We would like to know which affiliates provide which services.
I believe you have that, but we're happy to provide that.
We
we're-
want to make sure we've got it crystal clear. I think we have portions of it, but we don't have all of it.
Okay.
The names of organizations and the countries that Planned Parenthood gives funds to overseas. So based on the tax returns and reports, you're sending money to overseas. Some of them have been listed as investments. Some have been listed as other things. We'd like to get some detail and specificity as to how much is going to which countries and what those are for. Is that fair?
I really have to talk to my team about that, but I will.
Is that, okay.
And I'm happy to talk to the committee staff about
That's
what it is they're
great. A
trying
lot
to
of this will be follow-up with committee staff. I just want to make sure that we're on the record what we're asking for. We obviously have some concerns about the Planned Parenthood Action Fund. So we're trying to get to the duties performed and compensation received for all Planned Parenthood or affiliate employees. This can be either by the Planned Parenthood Action Fund or for either of the, I believe there are 2 527 organizations. One of our concerns is the shared services and the sharing of employees between political activities and non-political activities. And we would like to understand how broad and based that is.
Okay.
Okay. The cost of reimbursement for both contraception and abortion obviously breaks down into in-clinic as well as the pill.
Actually, there's a lot of other kinds of contraception, too.
Yes. Contraception I left as broad as I could, but for the abortion
I'm
services.
just saying, I think it's important. I'm not sure we really got into much of that conversation about how birth control, how many different kinds of birth control there are now, because it's one of our specialties.
Well, help us understand what services and money you're allocated and what the costs of that are. Because there were some points that you should be helping to drive down those costs, and we're just not understanding the ratio and
yes,
why.
I think there was some, I mean,
Yeah.
that's why
it needs clarification.
As I
I'm
came
not
up,
asking for it.
it was clear that folks weren't aware of the various costs of different kinds of contraception.
Exactly. And that's where we need help. Not right now, just as a follow-up. We would appreciate, the travel seems excessive to us. Now, we're looking at it from afar. There may be a very plausible explanation. But when you have a nonprofit organization who says they're trying to put every dollar they can towards women's health, and then people are buying first-class tickets and getting private aircraft and chartered aircraft, we'd just like to have an explanation of that.
Yeah,
Fair
I have
enough?
no idea where that's coming from, but I'm making the list.
It's in the tax
I'm making the
returns. That's
list.
where we see it. That's where we see it. There's boxes to check for certain things, and we would appreciate some clarification.
Happy to provide.
A list of political organizations Planned Parenthood collaborates with, including the names and compensation received of shared employees. I think I covered that in general, but I'll keep going. You understand what our question there is. And then if there are political donations to Democrats and Republicans, I think most of that is probably financially, publicly disclosed, but if you could help us with that. That's a lot. Let me yield now, or let me recognize the gentleman from Maryland, and then we will wrap up.
As I listen to the questions that you have to answer and the information that you've just been asked to provide, I cannot help but think about the IRS. Our Republican friends said that there were certain organizations that people in the IRS didn't like. They even accused the president. And then they decided today, they said it was unfair. And I understand what they were saying, to go through and ask the same kind of things that he's asking you for. I just want to make, it just hit me as I'm sitting here and I'm listening to all of this. I think it's something that we ought to give some serious thought to. Ms. Richards, I want to thank you for your testimony. You know, as I was sitting here, I was just thinking about some questions that were asked of you earlier. And the implication was, in even asking the question, that you do not respect those who may have a different view with regard to abortion. And you know, I think that that is so unfair, because I think I have heard very few people in this Congress ridicule us if one group believes that a woman should have control over her own body and should be able to choose abortion if she likes. If she and her family and her, you know, her God, she makes that decision. And then the other ones who don't believe in abortion. I have not, and I've been here 20 years. I think we basically respect each other's opinions, period. I mean, is that right? I mean, do you respect, because a lot of this is a real personal thing, am I right?
Absolutely, it is.
But there's one thing that we seem to be sort of glossing over and sort of moving around. It is the law. I mean, it's the law. You may not like the law, but it's the law. And you are doing what is within the bounds of the law. And, you know, there are a lot of things I don't like, a lot of laws I don't like. But I still live in the United States of America. And there's a system of government. And I, as a lawyer and as a member of the Congress, I'm sworn to uphold those laws. Now, I might want to change them. I'll do everything in my power to change the ones I don't like. But in the meantime, that's where I am. So I just want to make sure that, you know, that nobody walks out here saying, oh, you know, because people have differing views, does not mean you don't respect the other person's view. I've never gotten that impression from you. I've read a lot of things you've written, and so is that accurate? Is that a fair statement?
Well, I hope I've showed today, I have total respect for this Congress. I have respect for people of different points of views. And I really think that's, it is important that we show respect for people who may make different decisions in their lives. And I think we need less judgment and more empathy in this country for people who may simply have different circumstances that we can never know about.
Now, Mr. Chairman, I just have a few questions of you so that we'll be real clear. I'd just like to ask a couple of clarifying questions to help our members understand what our next steps are. Republicans have announced that they plan to establish a new select subcommittee, and I don't know how much you know about all of this, but I got to ask, to take over this investigation. The question is, will that subcommittee have jurisdiction going forward, or will the Oversight Committee continue this investigation of Planned Parenthood? Do you know?
It's the intention of the committee to continue to pursue under the duly issued subpoena and obtaining all of the videos. According to the information they have from the Speaker, the body will consider a bill, I think it's a bill, maybe it's under a different structure, next week for the formation of this select panel. It may be empowered with subpoena authority, we're not sure. And haven't seen that yet, but the Speaker indicated this morning that will come before the body next week.
As we both know, when the Benghazi Select Committee was created, all of the standing committees had to turn over all of their records to the Select Committee. Is that what we are going to do? Is that consistent with what you know so far?
I don't know.
All right. And do you know whether this new Select Committee, subcommittee, will be given additional taxpayer funding to pay to investigate the Planned Parenthood?
I don't know the structure, I don't know the length, I don't know the powers, and I don't know the funding.
My last question, and I was unclear on your response to a question on this earlier, do you plan to invite Mr. Daleiden to testify? And if so, when do you plan to do that, if so?
We need to, A, clarify the disposition of the videos. Given that there's a temporary restraining order, we need to have that loosened up. When we obtain all of those videos, we'll work in partnership with you and develop a plan on how to deal with those. I don't know with the structure of this new Select Committee how that affects it, but we'll cross that bridge when we get it. The first step is to obtain all the videos, and I'm glad to see you agree with us on that.
Yes, definitely. The reason that I'm asking is because all of the Democrats on this committee have requested a minority day of hearings with Mr. Daleiden under the House rules. If our committee is going to yield to the new Select subcommittee, then we may consider withdrawing our request. But if our committee is going to continue, in addition to the Select subcommittee, then we may very well insist on our rights to have Mr. Daleiden testify. Can you shed any light on this?
Again, the first step is getting all the videos, and at that point, we'll make a determination.
To preserve our rights, I'm going to submit our September 21st letter for the record requesting a minority day of hearings. But I look forward to talking with you further about this issue, as we've been working together extremely well. But I want to make sure I protect our members' rights.
Very good. I appreciate it.
And last but not least, again, Mr. Richards, I want to thank you for your cooperation. You have been extremely cooperative. We have not always had that you got a lot of compliments from up here about the cooperation you have provided, and we really do appreciate it. And on behalf of so many women, people like my mother-in-law and so many others, I want to thank you, because I know of so many women who, if it were not for Planned Parenthood, would be in a terrible way. And so thank you very much.
Ms. Richards, again, thank you for your participation here today. You've been very generous with your time. I think you've honestly tried to share your thoughts and perspectives. I know it's hard and a long day, but we do appreciate your willingness to voluntarily come, provide your testimony in advance, all the things that we look for. We do appreciate that. With that, the committee stands adjourned.
Thank you.